Hello everyone, I'm Pacchia and welcome to Bloomberg Law on Demand. We're talking sports law today. I'm happy to say my guests are Steve Olenick. He is an attorney at the law firm Davis Gilbert here in New York City. And we're also joined by Mike Dolan. He is the editor-in-chief of Athletes Quarterly. Guys, interesting times to be a sports fan. NBA, NFL, both ramping up. I wish the Knicks could have pulled it out last night. It would have been nice to see, especially after the last 10 years they've had. It's also, we're seeing developments in free agency in baseball. Star pitcher Cliff Lee has signed to go to Philadelphia, much to the chagrin of Yankees fans. And watching the free agency process unfold, I was reminded of what happened over the summer with LeBron James, Wade, and Chris Bosh all deciding to go play in Miami. Wanted to talk a little bit about the way free agency works and related issues. Steve, could you kick us off here? It seems as if there's been a sea change as of late, especially with the decision and everything that came with it.
Absolutely. Well, players have contracts. Once they fulfill the length of the contract, then they obviously have the right to go elsewhere. And in this case, the players clearly had the right to go elsewhere. And LeBron James elected not to re-sign with his home team, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he elected to go play with Dwyane Wade and Chris Bosh in Miami.
Now, there's no official word, but everyone that I've spoken to on the issue has said that all three players met in Miami, talked about what they wanted to do for the next season, and came to some arrangement. I don't know what the correct term is, to all sign with the Miami Heat. I think all of them took less money to make that arrangement possible. Is that collusion?
Not under the definition. I mean, unless there was an agreement. Collusion essentially is a special agreement or an understanding between two or more parties to do something unlawfully, illegal. And I think here you have friends that have played, and I think more importantly, they wanted to play together. And I don't think that they came to any type of agreement beforehand. I think a lot of variables had to be worked out before they could actually sign contracts to play for the Miami Heat.
Mike, you're up to your neck in the professional sports world. How often does this happen? I mean, is this something that happens all the time and we're just hearing about it because these are the superstar players of the NBA, or is this a one-off?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, you had a perfect storm of circumstance. You've got players who have max contracts, so they can only make a certain amount of money. They're in a salary cap format, so they have to fit within a certain salary structure. So the circumstances were right for something like this to happen. But as far as collusion goes, they probably would be the first people in history to collude to take less money rather than more money. There's been precedent for this. I mean, the Dodgers in the 60s, Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale negotiated together. Mm-hmm. It was the first time two players had ever done that. They basically told the Dodgers, we want $1 million combined over 3 years. And at the time, there were no multi-year contracts. The maximum salary was $100,000. And it scared the owners so much that players could actually bond together to negotiate their services, that they actually collectively bargained, put in the agreement that players cannot act in concert with players, owners cannot act in concert with owners. And that would come back to haunt them later when they colluded in the 80s to keep prices of the salaries down. So what would be interesting to see is if this could happen in baseball, where
right.
Three pitchers could come together and say, we're going to go to a team, but they're going to have to overpay all of us to get all of us. That's where you sort of get into interesting collusion issues.
Steve, do you think we're going to start to see this? I mean, I imagine before we did this interview, I would have thought that this would be rife in the NBA because 2-3 players, that can make a real difference in a team. But as you pointed out, in baseball, 2 or 3 pitchers in a rotation can certainly change the fortunes of a team overnight. Are we going to see more of this in the NBA? Are we going to see more of this in professional sports in general?
I think you're going to see a lot of these guys are friends. So I think a lot of these guys want to play with one another. And I think that we're not going to see players flocking to go play for XYZ team. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see players want to have the best opportunity to win. And I think right now it just happened to be that with like Miami, they were able to get enough salary cap to sign all 3 individuals. And I don't think it's going to be something that happens 5 years from now. I think you're just going to start to see that people, friends want to play with one another.
This has to be, Mike, go ahead.
I would say the one thing that's interesting, and I think this is sort of part of the NBA equation as well, is these are young guys. You look at college sports, in the 80s, it was more about being on television. And when that sort of evened out, and you had a choice as a college player where you can play, guys started to play places where it was a little warmer, a little more fun to go to school.
Sure.
So these guys are still very young. They're 23, 24 years old. Some of them, like LeBron, haven't had the college experience yet. So if you're going to find a place to play, a place that doesn't have state tax that's really warm is an appealing place to play. And I think, you know, if you're an NBA team in Florida or in Texas, you're in a good situation right now because it's a little bit easier to recruit.
This has to be a nightmare for the professional agents who represent athletes. How has this changed the dynamic for the way they conduct business, if at all?
Well, I think in this situation, I mean, you have one agency that represents all the parties. That's what made it very interesting.
In the Miami Heat situation?
Correct. I mean, so from Pat Riley down to Chris Bosh, Dwyane Wade, LeBron James, to even the head coach, they all are represented by the same agency. So that's what I think was interesting here, because if you're playing the Miami Heat, you have to wonder in the back of your head, all right, well, did these guys come together illegally? And I think, you know, there's been enough literature out there, and it's been reported that people have obviously spoken about collusion. My personal opinion, I don't think it happened. I think it was a friendship that was basically all three of them wanted to play with one another, but I don't necessarily think they colluded. I don't think there was an agreement. I think there wasn't enough salary cap space for them to obviously all three sign until Pat Riley obviously put a couple things in place, but I don't think it was collusion.
Now, the owner of the Cavs has retained a firm to investigate the events leading up to the signing in Miami. Is this what they're looking at?
I'm not really quite sure what they're looking at. I mean, the way the culture of the sport has changed now. We interviewed Tyreke Evans for Athletes Quarterly earlier in the year, and Tyreke is 19, and his older brother was there. And I asked him if he was ready for this type of attention, and he said, you don't understand. These guys, when they're 14 years old, they're all playing against one another. So Tyreke has already met all of the other guys that he's playing against in the NBA. They've been on AAU teams together. They've traveled abroad and played together. They've been on magazine covers together. So it's not like it used to be where players are drafted and they hardly know each other. Maybe they played each other in a tournament once or twice. They've been playing with and against each other for several years already. So how do you document those friendships? How do you document those interactions? If a guy's known each other for 10 years, it's going to be really difficult to backtrack and find evidence that an untoward conversation happened. Can they look into it? Yeah. Can they actually find something to prove? I think that's the harder part.
The owners of the Miami Heat are obviously thrilled that they won out here. If you are an owner of a team that lost, this is an unsettling development. How are owners going to react to these events? Are we going to see more investigations, or is this the end of it?
Well, I think the repercussions are very serious. I mean, teams basically develop their franchises based off draft picks. And I don't think that any team out there is going to want to be charged with colluding, because in the event that they are, we're talking about serious fines, draft picks being taken away. And I think those are the fundamental things that these teams build their franchises on. And I don't think teams want to lose their draft picks, because that's essentially how you build the dynasty. Look at the Dallas Cowboys. They made that one trade for Herschel Walker and basically provided them the opportunity to win Super Bowls.
I think you might see more of a reluctance to put opt-out clauses in a contract, because that was the big thing, was that all three players had opt-out clauses at the same time. So I think if you're going to make a commitment to a player, you're probably going to try and get that commitment back in years and prevent something like that from happening, where several players can opt out at the same time and use that leverage together.
Usually when we have epic episodes like we had this last summer, the league feels compelled to do something or say something. Are there any expectations in the sports community that the NBA is going to have some kind of action as a result of what happened?
I personally think that there's a couple things that in the collective bargaining agreement that needs to be hashed out before this. I think this is more of a moot point. I think that obviously with the CBA right now, the most important things is the guaranteed contracts, the money, the years, that length, whether you can roll back the contracts. I think collusion is more of a moot point. I think that they will obviously put something within the collective bargaining agreement pertaining to this, but I don't think it's going to be a focus.
Mike, what do you think? Is this all lost in the collective bargaining agreement process?
Yeah, I think the owners have much bigger fish to fry.
Right.
I think they're concerned about total revenues. If the claims that they make are true, that several teams are losing vast amount of money, that's more of an imperative for them. Whether or not 2 or 3 players decide they want to play in the same team, I don't think it's going to be as big of an issue for them.
All right. Well, we'll have to have you both on to talk about the collective bargaining process, both in the NFL and the NBA. Guys, thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Steve Olenick and Mike Dolan, both coming in to discuss the free agencies and the sports scene. If you'd like to learn more about anything we just discussed, go check out our offerings on BloombergLaw.com and, of course, in the Bloomberg Terminal. I'm Pacchia. Thanks for watching.